Good evening and welcome to the Australian Monarchist League webinar. I apologize that my camera is not working, so you don't need to worry about your computer screens being broken with my face. But in any event, welcome. And we also welcome tonight Senator Eric Abetz. Eric has been a long-term supporter of our system of constitutional monarchy. He has been a senator for Tasmania since 1994, which would make him one of the longest serving senators in the Australian Parliament. He is a former Minister for Employment and currently chair of Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Legislation, the committee, which makes him an ideal person to speak on CANZUK, a very topical issue at the moment. So I'd like to hand over to Eric and welcome him most sincerely on behalf of the Australian Monarchist League.
And Eric, if we could just unmute you. I'm just trying to do it. I can't appear to unmute you remotely. In fact, let me, maybe 1 second. I think it's my side.
Right, I think I'm unmuted now. So
you are. Perfect.
Good evening, everybody, and it's a great pleasure and privilege to be able to meet with so many members and supporters of the Australian Monarchists League. And can I firstly thank you all for your support of the League. It is a great organisation that is really wanting to preserve the foundations of our Westminster parliamentary system in Australia. So it is about as worthy a cause as you can get. And might I add, without Philip Benwell running the show for us, I'm not sure that we'd be half as successful as what we're doing. So a big shout out to all of you. Thank you for what you do, but especially a big shout out to Philip for his steadfast, unwavering, untiring advocacy for our constitutional monarchy. If more people could actually stop and think as to why we have all the wonderful things that we do in Australia, such as democracy, rule of law, private property, etc., they might understand that keeping our system of government is a very important thing if we want to preserve all those fundamentals. Some of you may know that I come from a Germanic background, and I say to many a person that if you want engineering done well, go German. Can I say, if you want constitutional matters, governance matters, go the United Kingdom. It has got, I think, the best system and has sent that around the world. And look, just ask people what countries, what systems do they want to go to. People are fleeing other systems of government to come to democracies and especially to the English-speaking world. So we have a lot to be extremely thankful for, but might I also say a lot to protect, and that is why the role of the Australian Monarchists League is so important. That's why, Philip, your role and input is so important, and that's why it's such a privilege for me to be able to be part of it and do my little bit. As Philip indicated to you earlier, I chose the topic of CANZUK, in case you don't know what that acronym stands for, and I hate acronyms, but CANZUK stands for Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. And a few people around the world, and I was one of them in Australia, as soon as the issue of Brexit came to the fore, I saw the opportunity that if Brexit was successful, there could potentially be a grouping of those four countries together, not because we share a border, but something a lot more important. We share similar values, And that ultimately is a lot more fundamental than whether or not you share borders. The Brexit vote was one of those wonderful votes that went against all the predictions, exactly like we were able to enjoy, or those of us that are old enough at least, with a Republic referendum some 2 decades ago. All the elites, everybody was shouting. I still remember the banner headline on the Weekend Australian of this on the Saturday for the vote. It screamed, yes, yes, yes. And the good news is the people voted no, 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 and we retain our system of government. Similarly, in the United Kingdom with Brexit, and the elites were defeated by the people. That said, and now that Brexit is coming to the fore and the disentanglement is occurring, there's a very real opportunity for 4 countries that share a common heritage, common system of government, indeed a common sovereign. Or I shouldn't say that. We share a sovereign. Her Majesty's not common, but I'm sure you know what I meant by that. But allow me to rephrase that in case somebody would seek to misinterpret that which I was seeking to say. So there's a lot of benefit here. And now people will say you have to be neighbours to be able to form some sort of an alliance. Well, I like to boil things down to a simple proposition. I think it's very important to get on with your neighbours, but that doesn't mean that you share bank accounts with them. That doesn't mean you allow them to determine the colour of your house, outside or in, or the type of carpet or the type of furniture you're allowed to have in your house. And with the European Union, it was starting to become not only just good neighbours, but neighbours determining for others what they were allowed to do within their own house. And so the CANZUK proposition is one of shared values, hopefully shared trade, shared entry into each other's countries, given that we are, for example, the 4 of those countries are 4 of the 5 in the 5 Eyes, which is a security pact with the United States. So we share a lot of the same information about our security. Given that, we have a very good track in relation to who we can and shouldn't be allowing from each other's countries into each other's countries. There's a lot of commonality there, and I don't think you would necessarily see an influx of Canadians trying to force their way into Australia or the other way. The only country where I think that might happen is, with great respect to our friends across the ditch from New Zealand to Australia, but given that we've already got closer economic relations with New Zealand, I anticipate that not much will change in that space. There are some very real opportunities here for us, for trade, for tourism and interaction, and I think it'll become potentially quite a powerful bloc within the world community. So a trading bloc, immigration passports, and it'd be simply a bloc of 4 countries who, as I said before, whose geographical positioning in the world is quite diverse. 2 from the Northern Hemisphere, 2 from the Southern Hemisphere, I suppose relatively close, but nevertheless the physicality, in my view, is not important, because the physicality or closeness of physical borders was important. You'd think Portugal and Spain might have entered into a relationship, or China and Japan, or India and Pakistan. And as you go around the world, you see that simply closeness of itself does not mean that you will share values. Similarly, in our neighbourhoods, and I'm blessed with very good neighbours all around, but they don't determine what I do on my property. They don't determine the colour of my house or the type of carpet I have, whereas that's what the European Union is foisting on the other European countries and the British people, or the voters of the United Kingdom were smart enough to get out of that. And see, when you have a organisation like CANZUK, you don't have to have a common currency. You can keep your independence, yet be fully cooperative in areas of security, in having honest free trade, unlike that we're experiencing at the moment with China. So when I saw the movement toward Brexit in the United Kingdom, I thought to myself, now here's an opportunity, and as is always the one with these things, when you think that you've thought of something and you start looking it up, you realise that others have thought of it before you, and it's been good to be able to communicate with people in those 4 countries in recent times to seek to develop that. And it was just, two weeks ago, no, last week, in fact, how time flies, that I was able to do a 1-hour interview with Brexit Watch in London to talk about these very specific matters. But I think we've got a wonderful commonality with Her Majesty at the very top, but a common heritage in so many ways that would lead itself to a very powerful and successful bloc. So I am very interested in pursuing CANZUK, and would be interested in hearing your views as to whether you think it's a good, bad or indifferent idea, or if we do go down that track, what are some of the things that you think should be pursued? So, for example, I think we should be allowed to be fast-tracked into each other's countries if we are tourists, like the European Union members are allowed into each other's countries. And as I said before, I genuinely don't see any security problem with us doing that. But enough from me, and over to you, and be interested in your views and observations.
Thank you, Senator Abetz. So at this stage, I'd invite you to go and post any questions that you have for Eric in the chat panel. And I can see there's already been quite a dialogue and some commentary going on here, which is great to see. But if you could specifically address any questions that you have in here, and then we've got some time to get through them. So I'll go and read them out as you go and post them. Please, does anyone have any questions? Again, it's a very insightful and educational discussion.
I just saw a question.
Oh, thanks, Eric.
Elliot, I just saw a question from Sophie York, who drives it at a federal level. And that, of course, would be the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And my own view is that it really does need to be driven at the political level, because with great respect to our Department of Foreign Affairs, they have, I think, in recent times, dropped the ball and have not been as deft and what's the term I'm looking for, trying to be polite. They well, let me give you an example. They were so confident that Donald Trump would not win the election in the United States that they didn't even have a telephone contact for him, for the Prime Minister to ring him to congratulate him on his election victory. That is how out of touch they were. And even if you thought that Donald Trump was going to lose, wouldn't you just, as a matter of belts, braces and elastic, whatever else, still make sure you had the telephone number just in case the unthinkable happened? And so given that they weren't even able to consider that possibility, I think they might have some trouble in developing a framework to actively engage with a CANZUK type proposition. That said, I understand that the trade section is actively looking at what we can do for free trade with the United Kingdom, and that is, from my perspective, a very real plus, and all power to the Trade Department. And if that works, then hopefully with Home Affairs, Immigration, Security, we can get Foreign Affairs on board as well. But yep, these are matters for the federal government, but we need advocates. That's what I'm seeking to be as a chair of the Senate Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee of the Senate, but also in speaking with my colleagues and hopefully excite some of you people listening in this evening to come on board as well as a concept and just socialise it when talking to friends, etc., to get some momentum behind this push, because I think it'd be of great benefit to our nation.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. And we've got a number of questions pouring in, and I'll try and consolidate because there are some very similar questions. So this question here, what would be the relationship between CANZUK and the remaining Commonwealth realms look like? So, yeah, what would that relationship look like?
CANZUK, of course, does not exist. If it does come into being, it'll be a work in progress and we'll have to see how things develop, but I don't think it would be inconsistent. If anything, it might strengthen the ties within the Commonwealth. It's a bit like Australia and New Zealand with its closer economic relations. Well, somebody might help me. Did we develop those in the 1970s? Was it 1980s? In any event, whenever we did develop that closer relationship and bond with New Zealand, it didn't impact on the Commonwealth. And if anything, it meant that there were two countries that had, if you like, stronger bonds with each other when they came to matters of the Commonwealth.
Great. Okay, thank you. And again, there are a number of questions here. We're not going to have a chance to get through all of them this evening, but be rest assured, we'll be capturing a transcript of all questions and socializing this, give Senator Abetz an opportunity to respond directly. So here's a few questions in no particular order. So shouldn't we strengthen our relationship with our near northern neighbors as insurance policy against Chinese expansionism? Is one question.
Yeah, look, my view is that we are grown-ups, and it's not like in chances are kindergarten's wrong, because in kindergarten you would be friends with everybody. It's more like high school, where you had to be my best friend, and if not, you got dumped and you could only have one best friend. Well, my view is, as mature adults in the world, you can have a number of besties and get on well with a whole host of people. And so, yes, we do develop our relationships with Japan, with South Korea, with Indonesia, and all our Southeast Asian compatriots. But there's nothing inconsistent with that, with also developing a good relationship with Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. And if anything, we have been taught in recent times, it's very important not to have all your eggs in the one basket from a trade or indeed other point of view. And so spreading the risk, spreading the friendships, I think is good long-term strategy and insurance. Great.
Okay, thank you. I've got this question here, and actually a similar question, I think, too, from the UK. It says, can you tell me who you feel as a person in the UK government would be likely to have a positive response to CANZUK? I guess, is there this, is there a notion or is there an appetite for this in the UK government, do you think, today? Is any politicians speaking out saying, getting behind this at this stage?
I will now embarrass myself, but there used to be a Minister for Employment in the United Kingdom government. She got sacked, I think, in the end, or resigned from Theresa May's ministry, but is now back in the ministry, who was Minister for Employment when I was, and I in fact discussed this matter with her at the time, and she was very excited by the prospect. But at the time, the view was that until they could somehow disentangle themselves from the EU, it would never really happen or be possible. And at that time, the thought of disentangling from the EU was a bit like the Berlin Wall falling. Nobody predicted it, but it has happened. And so, yes, there are MPs, and it was remiss of me not to bring the names along, but there are many, especially in the Conservative Party, who would like to see a CANZUK type arrangement arise.
Right, okay, thank you. I'll answer this question here. We've got a space for a few more questions before Philip closes with a word vote of thanks. So would we see the freedom of movement to be the same or similar as a trans-Tasman arrangement, or would it be more limited between Australia and UK and Canada?
I would like to see a similar situation, given that we share our security information, given that we have a sort of common set of values between our peoples, common language, etc., other than for the province of Quebec in Canada. But other than that, there is just such a degree of similarity, and I don't think you would have many people trying to sneak into the United Kingdom or Australia from each other's countries under some sort of a disguise or whatever. And given our security and our quite sophisticated passport system, I just, in all those 4 countries, I would like to see freedom of movement as much as possible, and I can't see any real difficulty in achieving that.
Great, okay. And again, we've just got time for, I think, one question or 1 or 2 questions, see how we go before we hand back to Philip. And once, again, I will be sending out unanswered questions and have an opportunity for Senator Abetz to respond. It's come up a couple of times now about referencing the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Do you think he has an appetite for this concept of CANZUK, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would have thought it was very much in Boris Johnson's interests to develop something like CANZUK as quickly as possible, because those that promoted Brexit to the people in the United Kingdom promised that there would be benefits apart from just disentangling from the European Union. There would also be the positive benefits. So there was getting rid of all the negatives of the EU, which chances are was a big positive in itself. But if they can then show that they're kicking goals by helping to arrange a CANZUK type of arrangement, I would have thought that it'd be very popular in the United Kingdom and would allow Boris Johnson and the pro-Brexiteers to be able to point to some really positive advantages for the people of the United Kingdom from getting out of the EU. So I would have thought Boris Johnson would be very much on board.
Great, thank you. Well, before we close, we're very fortunate to have Sir Julian Brazier from the UK, former minister, is with us. So if I can get technology to work and unmute you if you haven't already unmuted yourself, I believe you'll be willing to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And could I echo Senator Abetz's words about Philip at the beginning? Without Philip Benwell, none of this would be happening. And could I say how strongly I support Senator Abetz's remarks about CANZUK. I'm embarrassed that, unlike him, I'm not wearing a tie, but I think there is a real opportunity here. Just 2 quick thoughts. The first is picking up on the Senator's last remark. There is a real opportunity here coming out of Brexit. There is a big gap within Britain emerging, which CANZUK could play a big role in filling. But the second point I'd make, and this is where it's terribly important, that every possible parliamentary cross-fertilisation is brought into being. I don't think there's yet enough thinking going on about this in Britain. CANZUK, as I understand it, started in Canada, and there's been a lot of thinking there. it's now spreading to the other 3 countries, and I think Australia probably is a bit ahead of Britain on this too. I think there's a real opportunity here, but it needs more parliamentary cross-fertilisation, and the work that Philip's doing in talking to UK parliamentarians like Andrew Rossendale, I'm a little frustrated not to be one of there any longer myself, will be very important in that. Thank you for the opportunity, Elliot.
Great, thank you. And Philip, would you like to close with a few words? I might have to unmute you. Unmute, see if I can unmute you. There we go.
Yes, thank you very much, Elliot, and I do apologise to everyone that we haven't got my camera problem fixed. It's a fairly new computer, but I suppose that's technology. Just a bit of advertising. Our next fortnightly webinar will be on Thursday, the 4th of June, where we will be talking about the Australian Monarchist League and what we do, and answering any questions that any of you may have, because I know there are a lot of new people that have joined us that want really to know what we are all about. I would like to thank Senator Abetz for joining with us and for speaking on CANZUK, and also Julian, who I'm delighted to see here, and indeed all of you. So I'd like to close now and see you in a fortnight's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip.
Good night all, and
Good
thanks
night.
for listening.